multiple new Chapter 5 screenshots were just leaked, including another look at some gameplay that I don't think anyone has ever seen before until today, along with some small dev updates and a new interview revealing more about the upcoming chapter. But no more waiting, let's just get right into it. So first, starting with the little developer updates, a couple weeks ago, the dev Amber was typing in the Poppy Playtime Discord chat and gave us a couple mini potential Chapter 5 teases. First here, when somebody asked Amber to take her time for Chapter 5, in reference to the controversial rush release of Chapter 4, she said, quote, "That's the plan," which is something that's been echoed by multiple devs now at this point. And now that we have our official 2026 release date, that tells me we might be looking towards the mid to later ends of 2026 rather than at the very start of the years like we're used to. Another message I wanted to point out was here when somebody asked Amber if she knew which chapter was going to be the last chapter, and she simply said she couldn't say, which, along with the very noticeable lack of mentioning that Chapter 5 was going to be the final chapter in any of their promotional material, makes it seem all but confirmed that there will at least be a Chapter 6, as I highly doubt they wouldn't market this game as the last chapter if it truly was. Somebody here asked Amber if she has seen the prototype's full model yet, or if it was yet to be worked on, and she simply responded with a smiley face, so presumably yes. While over here, when somebody asked if Kissy Missy was able to calm Huggy due to a lore note released during their Fortnite collab that alluded to this idea, Amber said, "You will have to wait and see," which maybe I'm looking too deep into it, but her responding to this definitely leaves me wondering if we will hear and learn more about this concept of Huggy and Kissy being partners in Chapter 5, especially since we have no idea where Kissy went at the end of Chapter 4, while we know Huggy is going to appear in Chapter 5. So maybe towards the end of the chapter, we can reunite with Kissy and she will help us calm Huggy down. That would definitely make sense to me. Then finally, a couple people asked Amber about the mysterious sailor character, which, if you didn't know, was a new character also teased in the Fortnite collab through this lore note by Poppy, mentioning Playtime Co. making some kind of sailor, with one person saying they felt like the sailor was going to be a very important character in the future, getting a reply, "Who knows?" Which, at least in my opinion, it kind of sounds like she might be subtly hinting that yes, they will matter. And when someone asked if the sailor was going to be in the next chapters, she simply said NDA, which means legally she can't tell you. So a ton of ambiguous and small teases by Amber, nothing too big, but it's always fun to hear stuff like this and speculate on what it might mean. Also, while editing this video, somebody asked Amber who this pumpkin was, something we saw in the recently released Halloween artwork, where she replied, "I can't say," smiley face, likely confirming this is a tease for a new character. However, in some more interesting teases, with the release of Chapter 5's trailer and Steam page, the CEO and CCO, Zach and Seth Bellinger, were interviewed by PR Newswire about the upcoming game, where they said some notable things. First here, Zach gives us a little blip into the development of Chapter 5, saying, "Chapter 5 marks a major step forward for the Poppy Playtime franchise," said Zach Bellinger, co-founder and CEO of Mob Entertainment. "It pushes our storytelling and gameplay to new heights while staying true to our mission of surprising and engaging players. Beyond adding new scares, it expands the world of Playtime Co. and delivers an experience that will stay with fans long after they finish playing." So a pretty interesting little blip, and while Zach says similar things to this pretty much every year, obviously for better or worse, what I personally like to hear in this statement is that he said they were focusing on storytelling and specifically a gameplay, which matters to me because Chapter 4's biggest flaws were, in my opinion, that they did a lot of storytelling, but it was mostly by sitting the player down and just talking to them, as opposed to telling the story more strategically as we move throughout the game, while the gameplay was just in general pretty underwhelming and felt like a second thought at best. So to at least hear Zach acknowledge these things as selling points makes me at least want to be optimistic. Seth goes on further, saying, "We've been pouring a huge amount of creative energy into Chapter 5, said Seth Bellinger, co-founder and CEO of Mob Entertainment. "From the visuals to the atmosphere to the way scares are delivered, every detail has been pushed further to create an experience that feels both stunning and terrifying. Fans are going to see just how much we've evolved since the last chapter." Now, again, not to get unreasonably optimistic, but I do like to hear this. Seth directly compared the previous chapters to this new one and said that fans will see how much they've evolved past that. To me, I think that's a good sign. I know interviews like these come around every year, and a lot of people will say they're just saying this stuff because they do with every chapter. And while that could be true, I've as always liked when the developers sound confident in their product and tells me that even though they might not hit every time with every fan, they are passionate and desire to make it better when fans speak out. At least that's what I hope, but we probably won't know until the game releases. However, now let's get into the new Chapter 5 screenshots. So as mentioned, Chapter 5's Steam and Epic pages were finally revealed a few days ago, and on both of them, there are a small bunch of public screenshots for people to see. However, over on Twitter, a user named Parrot DM'd me saying that there was apparently hidden information laying on these sites that nobody has discovered yet, and could be accessed by using a website called EpicDB, which is essentially a database that displays updates and other information about different Epic Games pages, where when looking at Poppy Playtime Chapter 5's uploaded images, there are not one, but two unused screenshots on the page right now that just aren't being displayed. One cinematic shot and one gameplay shot. First, looking at the cinematic shot here, we see what looks like some kind of conveyor belt and a control room over on the right. There's a bit of developer text at the top here, likely explaining why this was cut. And looking over at it, we see what they call the emergency gate control 1 and 2, both with red hand scanners blocking them off. And my only guesses on what this is that it's either to transport experiments or more than likely transport equipment across the labs. And judged by the multiple hand scanners, it'll also probably be used for some kind of puzzle or something in that vein. Although, like the rest of the screenshots, its purpose is admittedly vague. But a little bit more interesting is in the next screenshot, we actually see some kind of gameplay that takes place in the storage room that we actually have already seen in a previously released Chapter 5 screenshot here. Once again, there isn't a crazy amount of stuff to break down here. It's just another look at the storage section, but physically in game, and they've obviously made sure to keep out any big details like potential new characters or gameplay mechanics, so it's mostly just another cool look at Chapter 5 from a different perspective. Now, I have no idea why these screenshots are just laying around waiting for somebody to find. Part of me wonders if maybe they plan to update the Steam page over time with new screenshots. They did something like that back in Chapter 3, or if these were simply just cut screenshots that were originally added to the page but ultimately were removed. Which is kind of weird to me because they aren't crazy revealing or anything like that, but I guess we'll have to wait and see what they end up being used for. There's a couple other little bits of info that can be found on this page, like here we see what looks like will be the Chapter 5 icon, which is just a more blurred out version of the banner. They have a listed price for the add-on at $20, which would be the same price for Chapter 4 if that ends up being the final one, and the game's exact release time is set to December 30th, 2026. But don't worry, that is more than likely just a placeholder. So let me know your thoughts on these images and all of the other news.